So hi, sir. This is Eric Roos. It's Sunday, the 11th of August, and I request that you be the one to sign off on my PQS, or at least some part of it, because I don't know anybody else. So anyway, in the PQS, the question K1, discuss information to obtain on initial activation. Well, all right, so when I was in the VDF and Christmas Eve, you got a phone call, hey, Sergeant Roos, Lieutenant Roos, whatever it was at the time, there's a blizzard down in Virginia Beach, and I need you to go to Richmond to pick up the communications pack and then drive down to the armory at Virginia Beach and support the National Guard. Okay, so unfortunately, they didn't tell me whom to report to, which was an issue, because even when I got down there, nobody knew. But anyway, in general, though, it's the 5 W's: who, what, where, when, how, and why, and that kind of stuff. So, who is me? I'm getting mobilized. Why? There's some kind of storm, or an earthquake, or Coast Guard stuff. There's an oil spill. Okay, all right. Where do I need to go? Now, at the very beginning of an incident, you may not know. They may say, hey, just we need to get you down to the Coast Guard. Okay, all right, so they say, okay, there's an oil spill in the Chesapeake Bay. All right, so okay, I know where it is, and they may say it's just north of, I don't know, Stoddard Point, let's say. That doesn't exist, but there's an oil spill just north of Stoddard Point. 2 ships collided, and there's a big oil spill. All right, so now you have it in your mind what's going on, and they may tell you, okay, I need you to get down to Coast Guard XYZ, and maybe they'll tell you where to go from there. All right, so okay, I'm going. There's an oil spill. Here it is. I need to get to that spot. Maybe some phone numbers, possible phone numbers. Okay, phone numbers for maybe that initial Coast Guard station where you're going. Maybe they can tell you the incident commander, but it's probably not a good time to call the incident commander. But if you know you're going to be working, if they know the ops chief, the planning chief, the logistics chief, the finance and admin chief, they can maybe give you those phone numbers. So how am I going to get there? Do I drive myself? Do I go to some other place where maybe it's a bus taking you to that Coast Guard station? How am I going to get there? You could probably, and in terms of what to bring, most people, they should have some kind of 72-hour load, because the first 72 hours of an incident, they're so chaotic. You don't have the supply, logistics, food, water situations ironed out, so you got to be independent for that first 72 hours. Okay, what to pack? Well, based on the nature of the incident, and look at the weather report for the next few days. Is it going to be storming? Is it a blizzard? You're going to pack your hot weather gear, your cold weather gear, your wet weather gear. If it's in the woods, hiking boots and bug spray. So, all right, so I'm going here for this is why. Here's some contact information. How am I going to get there? Driving myself, or some kind of organizational transportation? And that's really the gist of it, I guess. So then, again, so now the next one, discuss how to properly prepare for and properly report to an incident. Ensure to cover initial meetings with your supervisor. Well, let's say you have to go initially to that Coast Guard station just to get close to the place, but then they may say, okay, so there at some point you're going to sign the ICS form 211 to check in, because personnel accounting is of extreme importance. You don't want to lose track of anybody, right? So you're going to sign the 211, and maybe they'll say, okay, we need you to move forward to a camp or to a staging area, or they may tell you actually to go to the incident command post, depending on how mature anything is and how quickly things can be set up. So you're signed in to 11, maybe do some finance and admin stuff, what's your name, your address, blah, 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 what's your anticipated duty station, maybe figure out your pay rate. I don't know. But when you first sign in, there should be, some kind of admin stuff to get done other than saying maybe just I'm here, okay? So then you're going to go forward to someplace, a camp, a staging area, the incident command post. And then, of course, you're going to meet with your supervisor, like, okay, boss, I'm here. What is it that you want me to do? Okay, where do you want me to do it? When can we have periodic meetings to discuss, the progress of things? So tell them what you can and cannot do, maybe what your credentials are, what your experiences are, so that person knows how to employ you. Because if there's a hole in your experiences, he or she knows not to tell you to do that, but the incident commander may know someone else that can backfill that little gap in your capabilities. All right, so now question number 3, discuss the NIMS ICS concepts and principles. Now I'm doing this without studying at all, okay? So the chain of command, it's critical. So everybody reports to one person, okay? Not like in the Army where you have the first sergeant, the CO, and the XO, and you work for all 3, and it's just chaos. So here, the idea, the ICS, everybody works for one person. And then, so, for example, the ops chief reports to the incident commander. Incident commander reports to either maybe the emergency manager in a jurisdiction or to the political leadership, depending on the size of the organization and how they have things set up. Unity of command. Again, well, okay, all right, okay, let me back up. The chain of command is for the flowing. The chain of command is a chain of personnel in leadership positions where orders and information, come down from higher leaders down to the bottom, and information flows up from the bottom to the top so that the leaders know what's going on, and then they can give leaders and again send them down the chain of command for execution. So unity of command, that's where everybody has one boss, so it's clear. If I have a problem, this is the person I go to. And if someone tells me what to do, it has to be this person, because that's the only person that can tell me what to do. It's very clear. ICS forms, there's a whole boatload, no pun intended for the Coast Guard, boatload of forms. You may have seen in my Master Emergency Management Specialist, there's 211, 212, 205, 205 Alpha, the 213 for message forms, the incident briefing, all kinds of forms that are standard, uniform. That's what they use. And once you're trained on them, you know how to use them. A lot of the data may go directly into Web EOC anyway. Some data will probably go into Web EOC. ICS terminology. This is another big thing. There's a standard terminology. Every word, every term has a specific meaning. We don't use 10 codes. We don't use slang, blah, blah, blah. Like when you hear strike team is a homogeneous group of a certain type of capabilities, like a bunch of ambulances that are going out to a certain location. So those group of ambulances with their strike leader, who's their first person in the chain of command, they're going to perform a certain function somewhere. Okay, so a strike team is a homogeneous group. A division is a certain area of terrain. So there's the East Division, the North Division, the West Division. All these terms mean something. So you have to stick with the terminology or else things can get confused, okay? Okay, the operational planning cycle. Well, I need, forgive me, I do need to pull this up. Okay, so the planning P. All right, so at the various thing that's happened is something happens. A fire at a house or that oil spill, something happens. And then so they notify 911 by phone or channel 16 on Coast Guard radios. So that's the notification. So then the Coast Guard that gets the channel 16 call, they'll send people out there to see what's going on, have some kind of initial response, and find out what is going on. How big is this thing? Or likewise, on the ground, they'll call the police, they'll call the fire, they'll call an ambulance. They'll go out there to get the initial eyes on the problem, do what they can, but if they can't handle it, they have to call back to 911 and say, hey, look, this is really big. We need more fire trucks, more police cars, more ambulances, whatever. And then it just grows from there. Okay, so as those people are at the initial people are there and they're reporting back to 911 or channel 16 what's going on, then some kind of leadership has to get involved to find it. Okay, all right, I see what's going on. This is pretty big, and it can probably get bigger. Okay, so they'll at that point they'll designate someone to be the incident commander or the unified. The team that's going to make up the unified command, and they'll bring them in and they'll say, hey, look, this is what happened. It's in the Chesapeake Bay. There's an oil spill right now. It's spreading at calculus 500 feet an hour for those calculus problems, and they say so hey, look, we need you to get out there, take charge, and try to stabilize it. Keep that oil spill from growing, let's say, and as an initial thing, right? Just get it to stop growing, and maybe do something to keep the oil from coming out of the ship, or transfer the oil out of the ship into something else, something like that. Just those type things. That's your initial objectives to incident commander. So then the next thing, though, is the strategy meeting. Okay, so that's where the incident commander pulls together people and say, hey, look, we have this oil spill, and we gotta stop the oil from spreading, and we gotta get this oil off the ship to keep it from, we can't stop it from leaking. So if we transfer it, so they'll think of different strategies to do that. What are the different means that we have available to stop that oil from spreading, and the different ways that we have to maybe get that oil off the ship? Just broad thing. But then once, strategy is basically a broad brush, right? So then you go into now that they have the strategy nailed down, then they go and they prepare for the tactics meeting. And it should actually be prepare for the tactics briefing, because you prepare for the briefing by making the tactics you're going to use. Okay? So, now this is probably a rather ugly meeting at first, because people are just throwing stuff against the wall to see if it sticks. But anyway, okay, we know the strategy, we know the incident objectives, so how are we actually going to do that? And that's the tactics, right? So then they have the tactics meeting where they tell people, hey, look, this is what we're going to do. You know, we're going to use these booms, these whatevers to do this. But then you have prepare for the planning meeting. Now, I'm a little fuzzy on the difference between planning for the, the prepare for the planning meeting. It's got to be, okay, we know the tactics. So now let's identify the resources necessary to employ those tactics. Okay, you know, what ships are around that can pull these booms out to encircle the oil? What else might we need? What you know, who has the stuff to put on the oil to maybe coagulate it so that it, you know, we can pick it up better? So is there something out there that can suck up the oil so we can stop it from spreading from within? And all these resources are identified and probably notified. And then you have the planning meeting where they actually say, hey, look, we know that here's our strategy, here's our tactics, and here's the resources that we're going to use to get it done. Then, you know, then you have the incident action plan, preparation and employ. And that's where you have to, all those forms that I talked about, basically, they have to get done. And you know, who does what, what's the, there's a form out there where these are the people involved for this function. These are the people for this function. There's the radio frequency form. These are the nets we're going to use. These are the frequencies for those nets. Okay, and you have to have net discipline, and this is going to be net control maybe for certain nets, right? Then you give the briefing. And then within that initial period where there's still chaos, then you get that out there, you do what you can with the resources, with the strategy you initially thought of, the tactics you initially thought of, the resources you initially thought of, you assess the effectiveness of that, and then that's where the cycle begins again. So the incident commander or the unified command members, they look at what's been done so far, what's been tried so far. So they either keep the same objectives, or hopefully with some of the objectives done, they make new objectives or modify the objectives maybe slightly. And then you go back into, okay, so these are the objectives. So what's our strategy for doing it? What are the tactics we're going to do it? Okay, hi everybody, these are the tactics we're going to employ. Then prepare for the planning meeting. Okay, what resources do we need to get these tactics done? And then the planning meeting. Hey everybody, this is our strategy, these are our tactics, these are the people, these are the resources we need to get that done. Then again, they go through the new incident action plan, preparation and the approval. The incident commander signs off on that approval. Then they get into the briefing, and again, they execute what they've done, they assess it, and then it starts all over again. Span of control. All right, so somebody can only supervise so many people. Okay, one person can't supervise 20, unless it's just a really simple task, right? So the general rule is someone, well, there are different places say different things, 3 to 5, 5 to 7, but regardless, the complexity of the task and the experience of the people all has to get considered when considering how many people you can supervise. Now, at that initial response to the incident, it's just a police officer. It's just the fire truck. It's just the ambulance people. Or it's just that initial Coast Guard boat that gets out there. But as more and more resources coming into the play, that ops section that has only maybe the ops chief and maybe an assistant at first, all of a sudden they have all these different groups, all these different type of capabilities that they have to maneuver around the battlefield to get this incident under control. And depending on the number of subunits, the incident commander can't supervise them all by him or herself. So then they make, a division. Okay, you're Division East, and you have these resources to deal with. You are Division West, from this river over to here. You are in charge of these resources. There's different ways to do that, but again, somebody can only supervise so many people, and then once you break that threshold, then you're less and less effective, and you can even fail. So you've got to delegate responsibility. You have to form further subdivisions so that the span of control can be manageable. Okay. Resource management. So now, okay, there's different contexts of resource management, but let's talk about the stuff on the battlefield. So the incident commander has to know what resources are out there, the number of trucks, fire trucks, the number of ambulances, the number of helicopters, the planes that are out there dropping stuff on the oil. What resources are out there? Where are they? What's their status? How much longer can that plane fly before it has to refuel or get crew rest? When are these people going to run out of supplies? What's their status? Where are they? What are they doing? Are they okay? When's the last time we heard from them? Similarly, the incident commander needs to know what resources might be in the staging area. So if something happens to one of the resources currently employed, the incident commander can call like resources or some other resources as is necessary to get from the staging area to the front line. Okay. And likewise, after a while, people need rest, recuperation, etc. So they're going to get sent back, ideally maybe to a camp where they get rest, refitted, eat, just recover. And at some point in time, they'll probably flow back to the staging area and then get called forward to deal with the event. So resource management in terms of stuff and supplies is important. And of course, then there's the money. Okay, so there's going to be money that the incident commander can spend to get the job done. And so obviously the finance and administration people have to keep track of who has spent what money for what. Now the logistics section orders the supplies. The finance section pays for it. So logistics has to know what supplies are on order, what stuff has already arrived, where supplies are, and the finance section has to keep track of the expenses and time cards for people. And if somebody gets injured, they're involved with workman's comp. All right, scope, roles, responsibilities, jurisdiction, and authority. All right, so sometimes the incident commander will be the emergency manager for a jurisdiction. In that case, the incident commander should have most, if not all, of the authorities necessary to get the job done. But if not, then the jurisdiction leadership is going to have to give that person additional authority in order to have a unity of command, so that there's one person in charge, and that person has the ability to maneuver all the relevant pieces around the battlefield to get the job done. Because if the incident commander has to always go up to the agents, to the leadership, the jurisdiction leadership, to try to get control over something, it's going to be a problem. So, and likewise, you know, the ops chief has implied authority to move the pieces around the battlefield, logistics. They have implied authority to order things, keep track of stuff. And the finance, well, they certainly have implied authority to keep track of finances and process workman's comp, etc. So anyway, so that's the first page of the PQS for ICS activation and deployment. So is that good enough? And if you're willing to sign off on my PQS, could you possibly sign off on whatever blocks? There's three blocks there, only three. Can you maybe sign off on 1, 2, 3 based on, you know, what you heard? And then if that's how you like it, then I can do it again for the second page, or we can do it by a Zoom. I'll make a generous donation to your flotilla if you would spend that time with me. I'd really appreciate that. Anyway, so please advise. Thank you so much.